Michigan's Naz Hillmon was a big impact pioneer last season, the only active Big Ten athlete so honored. She's also the reigning Big Ten Women's Hoops Player of the Week after stringing together a pair of double-doubles last week in Michigan's wins over Purdue and Ohio State. And the Wolverines won their 7th straight game last night, handing Indiana its first conference loss, pulling away in the second half to beat the 5th-ranked Hoosiers 65-50. Hillmon picking up right where she left off last week, leading everyone with 21 points as the Wolverines got their second win over a top 5 team this season, winning it by the final of 65-50. And Naz Hillmon joining us now for our big interview. Naz, great to have you with us. First place in the Big Ten now at 10-1. Again, doing it by beating a top 5 team, one that had been undefeated going into last night. What did that win mean to your program?
It meant a ton. I think it just goes to show the growth that our program has had, since I've come here, and of course, even before that. Looking at a stat, that was the first top 10 matchup in Chrysler for women's basketball here at Michigan. So it just, the growth, just the steps that we've taken to be in this position, but just the hard work that my teammates have put in. So it was an awesome win last night.
Yeah, you mentioned it. You guys are making a ton of history. It's your second top 5 win this year. You beat Baylor in the other one. You'd never won a top 5 game as a program heading into this year. So this is the first one ever at home. So arguably, in some senses, maybe the biggest home win in Michigan history. It's uncharted territory for this program. What does it mean to be taking this program into uncharted territory?
I think one thing that I continue to look back on is, my senior class and how we've wanted to come in from the beginning and just be the best team that Michigan, has ever seen. And we're just notching things on our belt and want to continue to build off of that. But we love to have the first so that people can have the second and thirds. But it's just knocking on the door for us. Hopefully, teams to come will continue to build off of that.
You guys had a huge edge on the glass last night, 52-20 rebounding margin. Part of that is they missed a lot of shots, which you rebounded. So part of that is a huge credit to your defense as well. But Emily Kaiser, 16 boards. Was that an area where you knew coming in that you guys had a decided advantage?
We definitely did know that. We do have a couple of bigger guards, so we've really been emphasizing them getting in there. And just all around, I think that's one of our team's identities is trying to go in and win every rebounding battle, not necessarily just in this game, but every time we step on the floor. We understand that those are hustle plays, and it takes energy and effort to get those rebounds, so that was one of our biggest focuses last night.
You are having a fabulous season. It could go up and down the list of stats and accolades, but you're in the top 10 in the nation in field goal percentage. And in watching you play, I think the thing that's always caught my eye is that you do this despite being fairly undersized for your position. How have you overcome that to become one of the best post players in America?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is studying the game, studying my opponents, figuring out ways that I can get around them, even if they have, size or strength, or just really trying to figure out where I fit in. If I'm faster than that player, finding out moves where I can get across the lane. And if I do end up being taller than them, which doesn't usually happen, finding ways to shoot over top. So lots of film watching, but also a lot of belief in the hours that I've put in terms of my development of my game.
You were the Big Ten Player of the Year last year. How do you balance personal goals and team goals?
Yeah, I think I talked about this a little bit last year. Every time I do get a personal accolade, it's great, but I can't do it without my teammates. And those are the people who are surrounding me and make me look good, honestly. They do so many things that sometimes people don't understand if you're not, an actual basketball person and you don't see the things that aren't, on the stat sheet, but they make me look good. And my biggest thing is having those team wins and those team accolades and those team goals.
Well, one of those big team wins, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, was defeating Baylor, the team that had knocked you out of the NCAA tournament a year ago. How significant was that? As you were a Sweet 16 team last year, and now you try to go a step beyond that. How significant was that in terms of kind of exercising those demons?
Yeah, it was huge for us. I mean, we try to go into every game and say it's just another game, but for us returners, we knew that that wasn't the case. Knowing that both of our teams were very different, obviously we lost some starters and they lost some people, whether that graduated or transferring. So, I mean, it was a big game, and just to kind of give us a little bit of mojo back, and knowing the feeling that we had losing in that Sweet 16 game, especially in overtime, but just like a confidence booster, I felt like, because Baylor is historically a great team and they still are. So it was just great, of course, for the returners, but also as a program, like you said, the first time having a top 5 win.
I want to get into your personal story a little bit, and as I hinted off the top, it is really an amazing one. We're talking about this being Black History Month, day 1 of Black History Month being February 1st, and I mentioned you're the only current Big Ten student athlete to be honored as a big impact pioneer, and part of that was around the fact that you organized Black Lives Matter marches on campus in Ann Arbor in that tumultuous summer a couple of summers ago. How did you find your voice on these issues, Naz?
Yeah, for me, I think that COVID definitely helped me out on that. I had a lot of time to sit in front of the television and watch what was going on in the news and really, research and think about things. And, I think that so often we talk about how student athletes have a platform. And in those moments, I realized that I do have a platform, whether that be my social media following, or having teammates and people who listen to me. And I think the first step was understanding that people will listen, especially because of the position that I'm in. And I've always been the person that I was able to talk to, these issues with my parents. But finally, in my mind, it was just like, that's not enough. That's not reaching enough people. So I need to speak out a little bit more. But I definitely think having that time to reflect during COVID, where we didn't have basketball, we didn't have, sports in general, we weren't going to in-person classes, I had a lot of time to think and reflect.
Was there a first moment where you kind of said, I'm going to take that plunge, I'm going to go from thinking about this on the couch and talking to people to doing something? Like, what was that first thing that you did that made you realize, wow, I can impact people and people are going to listen to me?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was, talking to my coach, actually, because she had a lot of questions and, she didn't want to say the wrong things, but she wanted to be an ally and figure out how she could be better in this situation, and educate herself. And I think talking to her and then bringing our conversation back to my team was the biggest thing. Throughout all of it, people have a lot of questions. People have a lot of times they were saying, I don't know, I don't understand. And me being able to fill in those blanks for my teammates was the first big step. And then, following up, the Big Ten had a coalition. And after talking to my teammates and finding myself more comfortable with talking to people who don't look like me about those issues, really wanted to be on the Big Ten coalition. And from there, it's kind of taken off.
Yeah, I'm on the coalition as well, as you know, and it's been a transformative experience for me. I think it's been an incredible learning experience for everyone on the coalition, and an incredible initiative from Commissioner Warren. From your point of view, what impact has it had? Like, how has that coalition and some of the programming around it changed you?
I think the biggest thing for me is that we continue the conversation. I know that, of course, like I said, I found my voice in COVID, in the midst of it, where we were kind of in a shutdown. And now that things are kind of getting back to normal, people aren't necessarily talking about the issues that are still evident in our society. But the coalition gives me the opportunity to continue to talk about it and be around people who still want to find change and figure out change, not just in the heat of the moment where it's all on social media, but when we're in our what we call our everyday lives, and we don't see it as much on the front pages of newspapers or, in our media. So it's giving me the opportunity to continue those conversations, but use my voice and get feedback from different people who want to see differences on their campuses and hopefully to expand it.
The Big Ten Network did a big story profile on you this year, and first of all, what an amazing honor, right? I mean, I think it speaks to the impact that you have had. One of the stories that really resonated was your brother Zaharias, who at age 17, and in exceptional shape, it seems, and a really good basketball player, had a heart attack during a basketball game last winter. How has everything that happened around that changed your worldview?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing coming out of that was that, too often we take things for granted. I'm in the midst of my, junior year at that point in Big Ten conference play. And that was what I was worried about. I was focused on a basketball game, which is a huge part of my life, and the reason why I have such a big platform. But sometimes I think that we get caught up in our own things and we don't recognize or realize so many things are greater that's going on around us. And I think that another big thing that I took away from that is that in that moment, people were struggling with things more than just COVID, and sometimes we don't realize that people have at-home issues that they're battling through as well, and sometimes we only see people as athletes, and we're so much more than that. But definitely, one of the biggest thing was that, not taking things for granted, and seeing how hard my little brother fought through that really put things into perspective for me.
How's he doing?
He's good. If he wants to continue to play basketball, he has the opportunity. He got everything all fixed up, and he's going to college right now. He's in Georgia Southern. He's loving it.
What does it mean to you to have had enough of an impact at such a young age that there would be an entire profile story done on you on a national TV network? Like, have you stopped at any point and said, like, wow?
Yes, I have. I think the biggest thing is that, there's other little girls who look like me looking up and hoping one day that will be them. And having somebody that looks like you in a position that you wish to be in is very inspirational. For me, I had my mother to look up to as someone who I saw was strong and a black woman in sports, in the professional world as well. So I think that, just them seeing me will give them hope to continue to do what they're doing and, try to succeed, whatever I've done.
I do want to finish up with a basketball question, Naz. I mentioned you guys made the Sweet 16 last year, which is the furthest that Michigan has ever gone. As you go through the season, how much do you talk and think about March? I mean, obviously you have to get there first, and you guys have had, as we've discussed here, some really good milestones along the way that should put you in a really good position with a high seed when you get there. But how much do you talk as a team about taking it a step further and being an Elite Eight team or a Final Four team?
Mm-hmm. We definitely continue to try to build off of all of our success this year. We don't ever want to plateau of, our goals. We want to be better each and every practice and game. And I think that is what starts our kickoff of being in March. Every practice, every game. We know that the little things that we're doing in practice will help us in March. And the games we're winning or the rebounding battles will help us in March. So as much as we don't directly talk about March, we know that every single day, every single practice, game is going to build off of what we want to do once we get to March.
Looking forward to seeing what the future holds for the Wolverines and for you personally as well. Naz Hillmon, you continue to be a credit to this conference. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us here.
Thank you for having me.
Big Ten standings got Illinois and Wisconsin on top. They play tomorrow night in Champaign right here on the Big Ten Network. Michigan State even in the loss column. Purdue and Ohio State a game back. Then three teams with 4 conference losses. Indiana, Rutgers, and Michigan. Iowa and Penn State both 4 and 6. And Andy, you wanted to dive into some of those middle of the pack teams. So let's do that. Let's start with Iowa from last night. You saw them. What do you make of the Hawkeyes at this point of the year?
Bit of a tenuous situation. I mean, you saw in that standing, 6 teams, I think, are in. I'm including Indiana. Now the question is, do we get to 7, 8, 9? At one point, we thought 10. With Iowa, I want to take a look at where they stand right now because their best win is Indiana. And in talking to Fran McCaffrey, he rattled off those other 3 wins right there, but I always look at, do you have a win against the field or how many against the field? And as it stands now, Indiana on that list is the only team that will be in the NCAA tournament. Virginia, normally, you get a road win at Virginia, that's great. They're going nowhere in the ACC. It's been an anomaly for Tony Bennett. Road win at Minnesota obviously is good. Utah State is probably like the 5th or 6th best team in the Mountain West Conference this year. That was a neutral game in South Dakota. So the numbers say you're in, no question. But 1-5, you're trending the wrong direction as a 10 seed. They need to start winning some games.
It's a little tenuous. They have opportunities definitely down the stretch here, starting this week, Ohio State. So see whether or not they can get a win
on the road.
There. Yeah, get things going. We sat here last week and we sang Michigan's praises, and I think I kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, or maybe a half hour ago or so, when we were talking about Michigan and the Michigan State game. You don't want to catastrophize one loss here, but they don't have a whole lot positive on the resume. I mean, if you start talking about NCAA tournament, look, it's February 1st. I mean, I think it's fair to start talking about this stuff. They clearly have some work to do.
A lot of work. Now, the beauty, as we said, Michigan got those 2 makeup games on their schedule against Michigan State and Purdue, both at home. So they've got a loaded home slate at Chrysler Arena, although we've seen they're beatable there. But they've got work to do. If we take a look at what their resume says, there is still some tenuous numbers. Their net, 49, obviously that would say you're in. But as Mike says, and I would agree with him right now, they're on the outside looking in right now at a 10-8 record, 4-4 overall. Obviously, they're going to get to 20 unless something else happens. So they've played fewer games. But, Indiana, once again, is the best win for them as well. San Diego State, they're on the bubble, I would say, out of the Mountain West Conference. They're not a lock by any means. It'll still be a good win. But Minnesota has a quad 3 loss. I don't think Minnesota's a bad loss, obviously. It was at home. But still, very light.
Yeah, no doubt. And then I think the question just becomes what we were talking about. They're young, and can they get better? Can Diabate and Houston, can those guys be consistent game in and game out where they're really good? And we'll see. As point guard play, does that get better? But they clearly have some work to do. Rutgers has some work to do, too. I don't think there's any question about it. I was talking to Steve Peichel yesterday, and he said, it's like halftime of the Maryland game, and people are saying, you're out. He's like, let's wait till Selection Sunday.
Right.
But they have to do some work between now and Selection Sunday, no doubt.
And this is a great example. All these games that we televise in November, these non-conference games, they matter. Sometimes people, you're playing Lafayette, who cares, whatever. But you lose that, and now it just sits there on you, for the rest of the season, because as you see there, that is, I'm not counting Maryland as a bad loss right there, but the bottom 2 sting. They definitely sting. In a normal year, beating Clemson might be pretty good. It is not this season because they're going nowhere. But Purdue, Iowa, Michigan, those are good wins, and a road win at Maryland. And now another road win, even though it was at Nebraska, but it's a road win. The net, it's going to be difficult. I was talking to Kevin Paugo about them, who does a lot of work for various conferences, the Big Ten. He's assistant AD at Michigan State and runs the numbers. He has the KPI. So for Rutgers to get in, I think they'd have to be 11-9. If they're 11-9, that means they're 17-13 overall. But if there's ever a year for them to get in with that kind of record, it is this year, because to get to 11-9, that means they will have beaten good teams, quad 1 teams. They'd have at least 4 more quad 1 wins if they get to 11-9.
Just to give you some perspective, the Northwestern team they're playing tonight, who no one thinks is anywhere close to being an NCAA tournament team, just in terms of the record, again, we've talked about they're fairly talented. They're 87th in the net, right? So, 113 it's bad, right? And so you need to figure out a way. And as you said, they play all these ranked teams, and you can start moving that number up if you win some of these games here going forward. Finally, Indiana, probably in the best spot of any of these teams right now. Give us a sense of where the Hoosiers fit in.
Yeah, I think that they'll be fine. Ultimately, they got to keep going. But, look, a top 30 net ranking, 7-4 in the Big Ten. Look at those quad 1 wins, Purdue, Ohio State. The Notre Dame win, even though they didn't play well against Duke, still looks pretty good because Notre Dame has that win over Kentucky, a road win at Maryland. I think they're going to be comfortably in, and they've got more opportunities. So I don't see them falling flat.
4 of their next 5 are against ranked teams, so they can reinforce that resume. They could also stumble a little bit here. But to me, what we saw in that Maryland game, defense travels.
Yes.
And, man, they played really well on the road against Maryland defensively. And if you play like that on defense, you're going to win some more games. It's not been a banner year for freshmen in the Big Ten, but there's certainly some very good ones. Michigan with a couple, Caleb Houston, Moussa Diabate, Malachi Branham, Max Christie, both averaging in double figures. And the leading scorer in the group, Nebraska's Bryce McGowan. So, Andy Katz, who is your Big Ten Freshman of the Year?
So we sat here, a week ago, and we had Max Christie. I saw Bryce McGowan's in person on Saturday, and I am going to challenge the Jimmy Jackson rule. And even though they're in last place and winless, I think he's the best freshman in the league. And so I'm going to say with freshman of the league, it does not have to be at the top. I agree with player of the year and coach of the year. You better be competing for the championship. Freshman of the year, I'm going with the best player this season. It's been Bryce McGowan's.
That feels fair. He is really,
so I've
really
qualified.
Good. Yes. No, he's really good. And I think your point is well taken, because part of being a huge contributor as a freshman is sometimes being on a team that doesn't have a whole lot else, right? It puts you in a spot, but that doesn't in any way I think, minimize how good he is. I mean, you can see why he was a 5-star. Who's your next guy? Like, if you think Bryce McGowan is the best freshman in the Big Ten, who's after that?
Well, I think it's either Christie or maybe Moussa Diabate, over Branham. And then Houston, I was wanting for him to be that guy, but he hasn't been as consistent. One thing I'll just say about Bryce McGowan's, well, who knows in this era if you stay, but if he stays, I have to qualify everything now.
Yeah.
He really is a piece that you can build big time around. He's a big time talent, scorer. I witnessed with myself during shoot around. He was watching, iPad with the assistant coach. He's working weightlifting before. I mean, he's really working at it. He's got a lean body, different than his brother, but he's such an efficient scorer. And the way he gets to the basket, I mean, hopefully he stays around. He's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see with some of these guys. Max Christie, there's talk, would he be a first-round pick? Bryce McGowan's, would he be a first-round pick? And getting a sense for where they fit in and what they feel like their best option is. And maybe NIL changes some of that. It changes the decisions.
So you don't have to win games to be freshman of the year.